Hi, I'm Melanie, and in the next 30 minutes you're going to get everything you need to develop a more feminine voice. There's 7 major areas I found to be real tools, and we're going to cover them all in great detail. But first, let's take a little overview of each one of them to see where we're going to be going. When people begin to try and develop a more feminine voice, one of the first places they look is to pitch. But in this program, we're going to see how pitch has very little to do with sounding feminine. In fact, regardless of what pitch you're starting at, your voice can be completely feminine just by following the steps in this program. Well, if not pitch, what then? Well, we move on to section 2, resonance, timbre. That's the modulation of your voice as you speak. There's a definite feminine modulation pattern and a masculine modulation pattern. And we're going to give you some exercises you can use to develop a feminine modulation pattern regardless of where you start from. Now, the nice thing about this is that once you've developed this new pattern, you don't have to use it all the time. It's a matter of knowing where it's at, and once you find out, you can easily slip between the feminine pattern and the masculine anytime you like. So for those of you who don't want to be speaking femininely all the time, this will work out real well for you. The third area we're going to cover is dynamic range. That's the difference between the highest highs and the lowest lows in the words that you speak. It gives that sing-song effect that makes a feminine voice more feminine. And we'll cover how you can discover ways of developing that kind of dynamic range in the way you speak. Then we're going to move on to enunciation. That's the way you pronounce your words. Every word can be pronounced in a lot of different ways. Staccato, flowing, maybe a stair-step tonality to the syllables. We'll cover all the ways that you can go ahead and improve your enunciation to have a more feminine sounding voice. Then we're going to change pace a little bit and move on to vocabulary. Yes, there are masculine and feminine words, not in their nature so much as in who is going to be saying what. And we're going to cover some lists of what are masculine words and what are feminine words, just to give you an idea of what to be looking out for when you speak, so that you can practice not using the words that you don't want creeping into your language that would make it sound too masculine. Then we'll get a little bit more complex than that, and we'll actually talk about grammar, the way in which your sentences are structured. You see, when a person puts a sentence together, it's not just the words they use, but how they arrange them that betrays the thoughts that are in their minds. There is a feminine pattern to putting together words that reflect the role of women in today's society, and there's a masculine pattern. We'll give you some grammar tips that you can use, that you can put together sentences that will create just the right balance of masculine and feminine for what you want. Finally, we'll be talking about body English. Now, body English may not sound like it has an awful lot to do with voice, but when you have the body moving in harmony and rhythm to support and enhance what you're talking about, it can actually make your voice sound better, even over the telephone. Now, before we get started, there's 2 things I'd like to cover. One of them distasteful and one of them kind of fun. Let's do the distasteful one first. Okay, copyright notice. Everybody has on their videotapes a copyright notice. And there's a reason for that, to prevent people from making copies and taking money from the company that makes the tape. Now, I make copies myself, and I take money from companies that are big, faceless, nameless corporations that have plenty of it to go around. I am not a big, faceless, nameless corporation. I'm Melanie, and when you make a copy of this tape, if you were to make a copy of this tape, let's think positively that you're not going to. You're actually not taking money away from a big, faceless corporation. You're taking money out of my pocket, me. You're robbing me personally. Now, I hope you understand that that's not a very nice thing to do. I have 1 life partner and 2 kids to support. And part of the way I do that is by doing things like this. But there's another more altruistic reason not to make a copy of this tape. If you're getting something out of this tape, imagine how many other people could get something out of this tape and others that I will be producing in the future. By not paying for the tape, you're not supporting the effort to help others in this community and other communities that can benefit from this kind of communication. So, to wind up this distasteful part, please, it's not very expensive for this tape. At the end of the tape, there will be an address where you can write and get your own copy, which has the best quality, and also you know you're doing the right thing. Now that we've taken care of that distasteful chore, let's move on to the interesting one. People ask me all the time if they could hear the way my voice used to be so they could get an idea of how I've changed. And I used to do that for friends or for support group meetings. But after a while, I reached the point where that old role and that old persona is no longer a part of me and no longer appropriate. So I can't do that for you now without violating my own sense of self. However, I do have some videotape of myself at an earlier time that I'd like to play for you now so you can see the way it started and the way I ended up. Reason being, you might be looking at me and say, oh sure, she's got a feminine voice now, but it probably wasn't that far away from that to start with. Probably wasn't that hard. Well, the fact is, it was really far away to begin with. And once you see this tape, you'll know that you too, by following the same steps I did, can move from where you're speaking now to whatever level of feminine voice you desire. So, without further delay, let's take a look at the old me with the old voice.
Hey, you know, I'd like to know why Newtonian physics they seem to fly. Yes, all of the teachings of Goethe and Hume, oh, is there nothing but doom? Oh, well, good evening to you, gentlemen. Are you looking for rooms or looking for directions? Alaska's that way, Hawaii's over there. Mexico is to the south, and New York is, do you know where?
I think you're not going to be able to talk to this one much longer. He's not long for this world.
Can I help you, gentlemen?
I have reservations.
Yes, well, it's I only have 2 reservations left. You don't appear to be the Yamaguchi party to me. You must be. Okay, Mr. Robertson.
Well, as you can see, things certainly have changed. At least I hope you can see they've changed. Not only has the person changed, but the voice as well. And that's appropriate, because the voice should reflect the person. And now if you're ready to start developing the voice you've always wanted that really reflects you, let's look at the first area of study, pitch. Most people think that pitch is the most important thing in a feminine voice, and that's not true at all. Let me give you a couple of examples. First of all, look at Suzanne Plachette. Look at Marlene Dietrich. Look at Cher. All of them are very feminine women, and yet each one of them has a very deep voice. It's a husky voice when the voice is deep in women, but it doesn't have to be masculine just because it's deep. In fact, you'll find that in the population as a whole, the average difference between male and female voices is only about half an octave. 4 white notes on the piano. That's all there is. But remember, that's the average difference, meaning that since the average person has a 1.5 to 2 octave range of speaking and singing, from the highest pitch they have to the lowest pitch, that if there's only a half an octave difference between the two, there's considerable overlap. And what it really means is that only half an octave is above the range that men can hit, that some women can hit. And only a half an octave is below the range that women can hit, that some men can hit. In other words, there's an exclusive male half octave at the bottom and an exclusive female half octave at the top. But everything in between that is common territory. It's not where you pitch your voice, it's what you do with it. Now, even in terms of pitch, for those of you who are really concerned with it, pitch, because it falls in that range, and everyone has a 2 octave, 1.5 to 2 octave range of where they can pitch their voice, you have a very comfortable half octave range in which you can move your voice. For example, I could go down and get really husky like this. Or I could talk up here and be a little bit more comfortable with it in terms of being flighty. However, neither one of those is exactly what's right for me. For me, this pitch right here seems to be the best. Now, if I can go that low and I can go that high easily though, I can train my voice to pitch itself there automatically. And in fact, that's what I've done with this voice. This voice is about 2 or 3 notes above where my speaking voice was before. And in fact, if you'll take the tape and you'll go back and listen to the segment that I gave you early, and then you'll compare it to the way I'm talking now, you'll see that there's only a 2 or 3 note difference between that pitch and this pitch. Pitch is not the answer. If you want to play with it, you can raise it a little, but believe me, the best way to go about developing a feminine voice is not to deal with pitch first, but to deal with the other steps first, and pitch will fall right in there where it needs to be automatically. Okay, so pitch is not the answer then. It'll come as much as it needs to, and you don't even have to worry about it. What is the answer then? Let's look at the second area of study, resonance. Timbre, the modulation of your voice. What is this modulation? What's that mean? Well, if you hear a trumpet play a note, and you hear a clarinet play the same note, and you hear an oboe play the same note, or a violin, it's all the same pitch, but there's a whole different feel to the sound because of the harmonics, because of the modulation in the timbre of the note that's being played. This is controlled by the resonance within the instrument. In a trumpet, it's the resonance within inside all the coils of the trumpet. In a violin or a guitar, for example, it's the resonance inside the body. In a piano, the resonance inside the case. Each of these cases is very much like the voice box that we carry within ourselves. That's where our resonance comes from. It doesn't really come from projecting from the diaphragm or from the chest. It's really coming from the voice box. Now, when men speak, traditionally, they use a resonance that uses the full voice box. And when women speak, traditionally, they use a resonance that uses the full voice box. There's no difference between the two in terms of using the full voice box. But there's a difference in the way they sound with their resonance because the voice box in men is larger. It's not the vocal cords that are so much different. That's only a half an octave on the average. But the voice box itself is larger. That's why there's a larger Adam's apple. And as a result of that larger voice box, you end up with a very deep, booming, resonant sound that gives you that force and power and really hits those bass notes. That's not what you want when you want to sound feminine. Now, I'm going to give you an exercise you can do to develop the same kind of resonance, which is 90% of getting to a feminine voice. This is the real secret of the Melanie Speaks tape. Here's what you do. Put your finger at the top of your Adam's apple right now, and your other finger at the bottom of the larynx, the bottom of the voice box. Just speak whatever it is you want to say in your normal voice, and you'll feel that the top of the voice box at the Adam's apple vibrates, resonates, just about as much as the bottom of the voice box. That's what happens when you're using full voice box resonation. However, what you want to do is get it to resonate only on the bottom. Now, try going into a falsetto. And when you go into a falsetto, you'll find that it's resonating only at the bottom and not at the top at all. But you sound really ridiculous. Well, what you have to do is you have to lower that falsetto until you're at the proper point. Now, there's actually two ways I've found to get to this special voice, and here's what you do. Number one, which may be comfortable for some of you, you start in falsetto. You lower your voice all the way down, but instead of letting it break out when it normally breaks, keep it back in your throat and keep lowering it. Now, if you let your voice break, it sounds like now you can hear if I'm going down that that when I get into that second part, that's where a male voice is. And if I were to continue that and talk like that, I'd sound very masculine. But if you can go behind that, it's kind of the same thing as when you're speaking from the back of your throat for a cartoon voice. It's really the same place, arrived at from two different directions. One direction that may be comfortable for some of you, more comfortable, is to take that falsetto, suck your throat back here, and then sort of take it and be the Wicked Witch of the West. And when you're the Wicked Witch of the West, you sort of just keep your voice in that area, but you take off the tightness on the throat. Now, the other way that may be good for you is to actually go back and do a tight throat voice like the Wicked Witch, or like some kind of a crazy person like this. If you can speak like that, or do the alluded Q38 space modulator all without going so deep, then you can bring that voice out and you can open your throat a little bit without moving your voice out. And eventually you'll get to the point where you can project and add resonance and add huskiness and do all the things you want. But you see, that whole range in there is available to you. And I did that all in one note. But you have to get to the back part of your throat. And the only way to do that is to practice, to try. It doesn't come easily. It may take you several weeks before you can actually hit that place in your throat. But you need to practice at it, which means if you think it's going to be more comfortable for you when you're alone, obviously you don't want to do this when anyone's around. When you're alone, you go ahead and start at this high-pitched and go
pull it back here over here, sort of in the top of your throat here, and then you'll go down and down and down and down in notes, and then you sort of open up your throat, and when you open up your throat, you get to that point where you have a very wispy feminine voice, and you can be as feminine as you'd like to be, but that does sound like a little bit of overkill, don't you think? So we'll bring out the voice and be a little more realistic about it. The other way is to go directly into that voice in the back and go kind of like this, like you're saying, yeah, I'm a New York City cab driver, and gosh, that's a Midwest accent in the New York City. Well, he came from the Midwest originally. Anyway, so I'm a Midwest New York City cab driver, and I'm going to take that voice that I have here and just sort of bring it outside without moving it. See, that's the way you do it. I'm doing it this number of times so you can play this back, run it over again, and listen to what I'm doing and try to accommodate that for you. Now, when you go that New York City cab driver you're talking about, you can feel up here on the top of the Adam's apple. And the Adam's apple. And the Adam's apple. See, get into that old man or old woman voice. Back in 93, I started changing my voice with this Melanie Speaks voice tape. Well, anyway, you go back there and you get that voice there, Walter Brennan. And then when you've done that, you sort of bring it out here a little bit by just loosening up your throat. And then you sound a little bit like what we have here is a failure to communicate. Well, after you do that, you can get down here, and then you sound like the typical Southern belle. And you can say, oh, Magnolia, it's just marvelous, isn't it? And when you do that, you can bring a little bit farther out, and then you can get perhaps a little bit upper crust English, a little bit of an accent there. Maybe a touch of Cockney, because your lineage doesn't go back as far as you'd like in the direction you'd like it to. So you have a little bit of Cockney in your voice as well. But then you bring it out even a little bit more, and then you get into the typical American voice, the American woman's 90s voice, which this is. But you have all of those available to you. You can choose, you can pick, you can change, you can adopt one or another for a situation. Do parts in movies, be on stage, impress your friends, surprise your relatives. You know, all of this is available to you, but the key is getting back into that voice, the old man voice. Get into that voice, the old man voice, Pappy Parker's fried chicken, things like that. Get into it back there, and then you just slowly, gradually bring it out. But remember, you're not bringing your voice out. You're just loosening your throat, and that's the hard part to tell the difference between. And that's the secret, to be able to lower your voice past the voice break without breaking the voice. You all have a way of getting there. If you do,
the Aluminum Q-38 space modulator. That creature has stolen the space modulator.
well, if you can do that, you can do this. If you can't do that, you can try going from the falsetto and working your way down to it.
Any time you get back here on the back of your throat, like when you're gargling.
If you gargle, if you go right back in the back of your throat, that's where you want to be. Try going, you see, and then you've got that note that you're holding, and you're doing that without breaking your voice back out into full modulation. You're using the bottom of a voice box only. Now, again, at first, you'll find it's really hard to get to this place. It's an unfamiliar place to put your voice. But if you practice by either trying to gargle it and then bring it out, or do some kind of a cartoon character and gargle it out, or come in from the top and then move it out, you're still going to be just loosening up your throat, but keeping the voice back there, not breaking it. Everyone can reach that point, and that's the biggest key. Now, at first, I could only do this for about a half an hour at a time before I'd start to get a little hoarse. It wasn't a damage to my vocal cords, because I've been doing this voice now for 3 years, and I haven't had a single problem. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor. I can't guarantee that you won't have any problems medically with it, because I really don't know what's causing this, but I do know what's worked for me, and I'm sharing that. So for me, I was hoarse after doing it for a half an hour. But then after I did it for a half an hour the first day, I could do it like maybe 35 minutes the next day, and then 45 the next. Over a period of about 3 to 6 months, I finally reached the point where I could speak like this 24 hours a day. I never got hoarse. And in fact, I woke up speaking like this. And if something startled me, I spoke like this, because I wanted to sound like this all the time. And in addition to being able to do it longer, I found that when I first started this voice, it was very monotone. I couldn't do giggles, for example. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't put any dynamic range, that sing-song effect, into my voice. I only had a single tone. But the longer I did it, the more and more the tone began to have a higher range and a lower range. And I began to see that I could speak even lower and still sound feminine. And I could go even higher, and the range began to widen as I did this. And by the time I got up to 24 hours a day, all the time of being able to sound like this without hurting my voice, at that point, I had a full dynamic range, and I began to say, I can sing again, and I can do acting, and I can do all kinds of public speaking, and it's great. I can be all of me from the inside that I used to be in terms of communication in this new voice. That was amazing. For the first time, I knew I didn't need voice surgery. I could be everything I always wanted to be just by learning this little routine. Once you've done that, once you've found it, it may take you 2 weeks to find it, it may take you a month to find it, but believe me, listen to me, it's worth it, okay? You can do it. And once you do, you can slip in and out anytime you want. You can turn it on, you can turn it off. You can do it in the middle of a sentence, you can do it in the middle of a word. It's not a problem anymore. You get that good when you've done it for a while. So, if you only want an occasional feminine voice, you can have an absolutely authentic feminine voice at the drop of a hat. But, wait, there's more. Now how much would you pay? No, this is not handy Ginsu knives. This is handy voice trick number 3. Now we said we talked about pitch, which wasn't that important because it happens by itself. We talked about resonance, which is very important and does not happen by itself and takes a lot of work. And now we're going to talk a little bit about dynamic range. Now you've seen how I said I couldn't achieve dynamic range for 6 months really, to the degree I have it now, after I'd started doing voice this way. But why dynamic range? Why is it important? Well, listen to my voice when I talk. Just listen to what I'm saying. See, I'm hitting those high notes, but I'm hitting them only to make a point. And if you want to giggle, you know, you can giggle, but you've got to get into those high notes to do it, okay? Now, why is this? This is not something intrinsic of being particularly female, although women have access to that higher range. And believe me, when your voice is back here, you'll have an access to a much higher range of talking than you've ever had before. Once you have access to that range, people are going to use it. Women have more access, women use it more as a result of that, because it's a more emotional, a more squeaky quality. Women will hit that. That range is actually the same thing as falsetto. Listen. Yes! Yes! When I talk like that, I sustain it, it's falsetto. But when I go, yes! Then it just sounds like, yes! You know, but it's just hitting that falsetto area briefly and coming back down. That's what dynamic range is about. And even getting down and intimate and low and husky. I have a message on my answer phone at work that says, thanks for calling Melanie's Happy Acres, where reality is the stuff dreams are made of. Or is it dreams the stuff? Anyway, it's one of the two. But I use this husky voice. It's kind of the radio announcer, female radio announcer voice that comes on real husky. And now, at midnight on channel KBOY. Whoops, wrong channel. Anyway, you use that voice when you need to be more intimate. And I find in telephone conversations that women, when they're talking with men, as I've had some experience with in the past, hearing a conversation when a woman talks to a man, she is much more high-pitched, much more high-resonated, much more high in the dynamic range. Everything moves higher because she backs off from being confrontational. She takes the power out of her voice. Automatically in the business world, this kind of happens unless she's a real ice bitch who's trying to go after the career, in which case she'll keep that thing and get in there and be real rough and tough with her voice down all the time anyway, you see. But when a woman talks to men on a phone, she's going to answer the phone in business with that high-pitched, good morning. And that's the same way I do when I answer the phone at the office. I go, good morning. However, when you find out it's a woman on the phone, then you begin to lower your pitch almost instantly. And if any of you will experience both worlds, you'll find that when you pick up a phone and somebody says, good morning, and you say, hi, I'd like to find out about such and such, she'll say, oh, okay, just a moment, I'll help you. And she'll lower her voice to a lower range. Men, when they deal with each other, deal in terms of a competition. Women deal in terms of a collaboration. That's a very distinct difference between the way men deal with men and women deal with women. Even men who are good friends are constantly competing, even in jest, even in fun. Hey, I did this better than you. No, I did this better than you. Whereas women are saying, this is what I did. Oh, I did that too. Oh, you did that? That means something to me also. They're comparative, not competitive. And in a male society, you'll find that women have a tendency to lower their voices with other women because rather than being in competition, they're in conspiracy. In other words, the second-class nature of women is not bring out the whip and crack it, but it's all pervasive. And a woman grows up with that. And growing up with it, she knows that in order to succeed against men, the only way she has anybody who's really on her side is with another woman. And with another woman, the two of them can't be open about it because they'll get slapped back or kidded or ridiculed. And so what they do is they establish a rapport by lowering their voices, their dynamic range, and speaking in a more conspiratorial tone, where they can communicate as if they are in collusion against their male bosses. But dynamic range is much more than that. Femininity. What is femininity? What makes something feminine? Not whether it's male or female, but whether it is graceful and soft, or whether it is hard-edged and powerful. Hard-edged and powerful is masculine, whether or not it's male. And soft and graceful and delicate is feminine, whether or not it's female. One of the problems that we have in our society is that it's not all right for females to be masculine, and it's not all right for males to be feminine. Femininity and masculinity has nothing to do with anatomical sex, but it has a lot to do with how you use your voice. Now, to be soft and graceful with your voice, you will not have staccato, hard-edged things that are all in monotone. That's the way men speak. If I want to get more masculine, I will say, okay, I went down to the office today and I picked up some things that I needed and I brought them here and I worked with them at the house. Now, I still haven't changed from where I'm speaking. My pitch, much, just on the lower end. I haven't really changed the resonance, but I've gone monotone. And you can hear that when I go monotone and I talk about things, it's not nearly as interesting as if I have that dynamic range. But if I go into my more feminine voice and I say, you know, when I talk with a dynamic range that has highs, it also goes down into the lows. It just has kind of a more sing-songy effect, and because of that, it gives kind of a feel that there's more of a grace and a flow. Notice to that, grace, flow, the way I went over the words and rounded their edges. And this is the way that you're going to want to soften your enunciation. And when you have a single word, you can soften the incoming like, well, as opposed to, well. You can soften the outgoing by saying something like pear tree. Instead of saying pear tree, you say pear tree, and you trail it a little bit. Or, if appropriate in your voice, you can put that two-tone kind of feel to it if it's a good place in your speech to do that, such as, I went down, okay, down. A masculine voice would never say down. A masculine voice would say, I went down, okay, I went down. I went down. But you say, I went down. You put the downness in the word. It's kind of the same thing the word means is used in the voice in that case. But you soften your words, and then you pitch some words higher and some words lower, like I just did there. Some words higher and some words lower. Now, this takes a lot of practice also, but it's not as hard as finding where to take the voice from, where to get that from. The practice that it takes is start with belly girl. This is what I did. I started by saying, like for sure, I went and saw my boyfriend and gagged me with a spoon. It was just like grody to the max for sure. You know, for sure, totally. Well, when I started talking like this and I was doing real belly girl, you know, it was like, God, it helped me with my body English that we'll get into later, but also really helped me get off into the kind of, vocal tones and resonances and enunciations and things I wanted. Enunciation. When you do this, you're going to be like totally enunciated. But it's too much. Just like if you take falsetto, it's too much and you have to bring it down. Or if you go ultra feminine in your resonance, like we talked about, you have to let it out a little more to be the woman of the 90s. Well, the same thing is that if you take your enunciation and you're doing it too far, too much, you're going to have problems. So dynamic range that we started with, which gave you your highs and your lows and where you pitched it, led into our thought about enunciation that I kind of glossed over and went right into where you start to soften your words. But also, it's the envelope you put not on the pitch, but the envelope you put on the word. Like if I say voice, okay, I don't say voice like I used to, voice. Just one syllable, I say voice, voice. When you're talking about your voice, you see, it sounds like voice to those who are hearing it, but voice puts a little bit of an extra curve on it around this voice, voice. It's a pear-shaped sound going around it. When you modulate your words, see, modulate your words. It's a little stair step. And listen to what's happening with my S's. I don't say S anymore, S. A solid S is what you need. I say S and let it kind of get a little slurry. It's not a sound like a lisp. It's not a lisp. It's a soft sibilance. Sibilance is the S sound, and you can have a harsh sibilance where you accent the S and be very staccato about it, or you can go into a more soft S and modulate that. Now, modulating your words. Again, if you'll start with Valley Girl, I suggest you go out and get the videotape, Valley Girls. And if you get Valley Girls, the videotape, or listen to Whoopi Goldberg on some of her tapes where she does the Valley Girl character, you'll be able to immediately copy that. Don't try it until you've got the voice pitched in the right place, resonated in the right place. When you resonated in the right place, in that secret voice area that you speak from, and then you start to do Valley Girl. Valley Girl will accomplish both the dynamic range and also the enunciation. Remember, it's too much. But again, if you practice it and do it totally to the extreme, it's a lot easier to go to that extreme and then to wind your way back down to where it's a good compromise level than to start at the bottom and try to work up to that level and stop. Because when you're starting here, you don't want to be here and work up a little bit at a time. It's hard to do. You don't know where you're going. But if you make it more binary and say, here's where I am now, I'm going to do this up here now, and now I'll just tone it down a little bit, then you can keep some Valley Girl in your speech. And that's kind of appropriate for women today in America. Now, Valley Girl is not appropriate if you want to sound more masculine, if you want to be a career woman, if you want to be someone who's taken really seriously. And so I find that when I'm being taken seriously, like when I'm making a lecture on mental relativity or dramatica, mental relativity being the new psychology my partner and I developed, and dramatica being the story structuring program or software that we've developed that we're marketing. When I have a class in dramatica for writers and directors, I will speak to them more like, okay, here's what you want to do. You want to go over and take the concept of the act structure and see that stories can have both a 3-act appreciation and also a 4-act appreciation, depending on whether you're looking at it objectively or subjectively. Now, when I'm making a point like that, you see, my whole voice takes on a much more masculine tone, but that's appropriate to make my voice strike home and my words listened to, because you'll find in feminine voice, people take you a lot less seriously. Okay, so we moved through pitch, number 1. We moved to number 2, which was resonance. Thought you had me, didn't you? Then we moved to number 3, which was dynamic range, and then kind of slurred into number 4, which was enunciation. Those are all the ones that take care of actually what you're doing with your voice, per se. And using those, you will be able to develop a feminine voice. But there are other dead giveaways of being masculine, other things that masculinize you. Oh, dogs and airplanes today, my goodness. Okay. One of the things that masculinizes you is when you are using the wrong vocabulary. What's the wrong vocabulary? I got a pain in my gut. Okay, that's not feminine unless you're saying it as a joke in the middle of normally feminine speech or doing a character. You don't got a pain in your gut. You have a pain in your stomach or your tummy if you want to be really obnoxious about it. Then another word that men will use that women won't as often is want. Men want. That means that they are motivated. They are aggressively motivated to go out and get something because they want it. Want means lack. It means that they lack something. It's kind of like a need in a way. But they lack something, and therefore they want it, they're going to get it. They are motivated to be aggressive. Women who are not supposed to be aggressive in our society, even today, they don't want things, they like things. They would like things. You hear that in fast food restaurants all the time. A guy comes up to the little speaker box and he says, I want a Big Mac. And a woman comes up to the same speaker box and says, I'd like a small salad, please. Well, you see, the woman likes things, would like things, and the man wants things. I have a real interesting anecdote about this. I work in the film industry primarily as a writer-director, and some time ago, I work in the film industry primarily as a writer and director, and in my career I've also been a director of photography. As a matter of fact, I've been a director of photography in both roles. Now, in the old role, since I know my craft pretty well, I go in with a crew of people and say, I want a 1K light up there so that we can backlight this person over here and tone it down so that it's 50% of the overall light. Well, people would snap too. They do what I wanted. I had an occasion to work as a DP right after switching roles. I came in and I said, okay guys, I want that 1K over there to give this backlight and bring it down about 50% so it's half as intense as the light in front. And everybody just said, well, are you sure that's what you want? I mean, don't you think we ought to do this and that? And then when I finally convinced them that's what I wanted, they went ahead and took about 5 times as long as it would have taken me to do by myself to set the stupid light up. And I was thinking, what's wrong with this crew? Is it a crummy crew or what? And suddenly it struck me. When I said I wanted something, I was being aggressive. I was saying, here is my goal, and it subordinates all of your goals. In other words, you people, you men, are all working for this woman. And when I did that, they all felt emasculated. They felt I was threatening them. And they actually dragged their feet and bickered and argued with me before they finally gave me what I had asked for. Well, the whole day's shoot got about half as much done as I thought was going to get done. And I went home that night, exhausted, thinking, I better figure out a way to change this, because if we keep it like this on the second day of the shoot, on this 2-day shoot, we'll never finish what we're supposed to do, and we'll go over budget. Well, it occurred to me, okay, I'm not supposed to be aggressively wanting things and be in competition with them and their skills. As a woman, I'm supposed to like things. I would like it this way. Let me try it and see. And the next day, I came in and I said to the very same crew, well, okay, I think I'd like to put a light over here that would kind of backlight this person and give me kind of a soft look that's maybe not as bright as what's in front. I was very nebulous about it. And at first they looked a little sideways and then they went, oh, okay, fine. And they went out and they did the job. And it only took twice as long as it would have taken me to do it. See, I know my craft well, and I could have done it faster in any case. But in the second case, it only took them twice as long to do it instead of 5 times as long to do it as it did on the first day. And that's the problem that faces women in society today, as a little aside. That when a woman wants something done and she's got men working for her, unless she's an ice bitch and is actually commanding and has lost all her femininity, which she doesn't really want to lose, then she has to suggest what she wants in nebulous terms and let the men come to her rescue and provide it. Well, it's chauvinistic and fun sometimes, but other times when you're trying to get something accomplished as a woman and when there are things you really do want, you just can't get them by asking for what you want, and you can't be specific. So, the point of all this is that a word that a man uses is not a word a woman uses, and not only does it change the way that you are perceived as being masculine or feminine, but actually the way people will respond to you and give you what you desire, or make it hard for you to get what you desire and not cooperate with you just because of the words you use in a particular role. Now, we know that words are important, but we're going to take a little bit of enunciation and a little bit of vocabulary before we move on to sentence structure. And we're going to say, what do you do with those words when you say them? Well, aside from just enunciation, there's contractions, slurring that goes on that men do that women plain and simply don't. Feminine speech does not slur. It's graceful, not clumsy. Now, a man will say, I have to go to the store. I have to go to. Have to is not a word. Go to is not a word. But that's what men say. A woman will say, I have to, if she's going to use the word have. And she'll say, go to the store. I have to go to the store. But a woman, again, would choose a word like ought to instead of have to. I ought to go to the store.
Why is that? Now look in our society in terms of the power that men have. Men have power. They can be aggressive. They are in control. Women are getting some of that, but still in our society, women are generally brought up to the point that they believe that they have less power and less control over their own lives. So when a man is going to say he needs to do something, need describes, I have a goal, a purpose, and this is a requirement, therefore I need to do it. That's all contained in the word need. When a man needs to do something, a woman feels she should do something. Because a woman brought up in our society has a tendency in this day and age even to feel that she's not in control of achieving goals. She may not even be able to set the goals for her life. And therefore, that if she wants something to happen, she should do this. It has more of a sense of obligation than a sense of instigation. And that is a very big difference in the mental attitude of men and women.
Let's move on to our second to last section and talk about grammar. Now, grammar is the sentence structures that you have, parenthetical phrases. Remember, in our society, men are trained to be aggressive. They're trained to go after what they want, to be in control. Women are trained not to be in control, to have things come to them and make choices between them, to be passive or submissive, to have others be responsible for providing women with what they need, particularly men. As a result of this, women, dating way back, still are not considered worthy of having opinions. And so they can have moods, but they can't have decisions of opinions. For example, a man would say, I'm going to do this, and a woman would say, I was thinking that I ought to do this. When she says, I was thinking I ought to, it doesn't mean I've made up my mind. It means I'm inclined to, but if you have any objections, I'll reconsider. Now, that's a pretty sad state of affairs, really, in terms of our society, to say that in order to be feminine, a woman can't have a strong opinion. But in terms of femininity, it's very, very important, because a feminine person is a non-aggressive person. A feminine approach is one of compromise, not conflict. Now, you will notice that women get together to conspire, men get together to compete. And you'll see this all the time. So women are never going to be, in feminine speaking, saying that they have a definite opinion about this or that, like the bra-burning feminists of the 70s. That doesn't make them any less women or any less female, but it did make them an awful less feminine. So if femininity is what you're after, avoid making direct statements and instead couch it in terms that would be more acceptable.
See, a woman being feminine is going to say, well, I think I ought to do this, not, well, this is what I ought to do. She goes, I think I ought to do this. This is what I need to do. Okay, she's backpedaling. She's stepping away from authority, assertiveness. Now, believe me, I know this is anathema to feminism. And I know that this is something that is bad to perpetuate. But this tape is not about the subject of how to break those stereotypes. It's first about how to become one. And once you're there, believe me, once you're there, you will find all kinds of reasons to learn about how to break those stereotypes. And having come from perhaps another stereotype, you'll have unique tools to be able to do it. But for feminizing your voice, stay away from those assertive words and go with more the incisive words, go with more the kind of sort of words, and go with words that don't have that command value to them. And you will find that your voice will be considered a lot more feminine.
Now, let's move on to our final area of body English. Now, once again, body English doesn't sound like there's that much to do with actually speaking in a feminine or masculine voice. But you'll find that the soul gets moving when you're putting everything together, body and mind. When everything's working together in tandem, in harmony, it accentuates, it enhances what you're saying and enhances what you're doing. In other words, the body English supports a feminine voice supports feminine body English, and the two of them work together to create the entire aura that you want.
Now, as you've been watching me, you've noticed that I've done an awful lot of things with my hands. I've gone like this, I've gone like that, I've gone like that. Okay, it's not just for show. It's not just to have feminine movements when people see me in person, but it's also to help guide my use of the voice. Women talk with their hands a lot more than men do. There's a connection, a mental connection between being sing-songy in your voice and using your hands to visually describe what's going on. There's a grace to it. Each one supports the other. And when you're trying to talk on the phone to someone and sound feminine, if you put your hands at your side and try to sound feminine, unless you have a lot of practice, it's really hard to just stare straight ahead and talk on the phone and sound feminine, because you have more of a flow, more of a dance-like quality, more of a dynamic range and a smooth enunciation in the intonations, and all of this gives way to a very graceful dance-like feeling to your voice. But that dance-like feeling is based on rhythm. It's based on syncopation. It's based on sub-themes and harmonics. And when you're using one hand or two hands, you're supporting those harmonics. You're supporting those rhythms. You're nurturing them, helping to build the envelope of your voice. And you'll find that as you're trying to do your Valley Girl and you're beginning to work your way into having the proper level of speaking, that using the affectations of your hands and your arms and your legs and leaning forward when you're talking and throwing yourself back and cocking your head and doing all the things that you would do femininely, that will support your voice. Similarly, using the proper kind of voice with all of the things we've talked about will support the feminine movements. Each one creates the other, and hand in hand they create a total feminine package.
Now we've come to the end of the program. We've covered all 7 areas to show you what you can do to develop an absolutely feminine voice.
Now please write me with suggestions. Let me know if this is working for you, if there are problems, if there can be improvements. Let me know how this can be made better to help you. Or if you've come up with any techniques of your own that you think I should incorporate that would help others, write me. Let me know. Here's how I can be reached. That's it for this tape. It's been fun sharing this with you. Let me know what you think. Have a good time and have a much more feminine voice. Good luck.